We're pleased to offer this webinar today. Again, things have changed very quickly in the last week and a half with the ending of the grain deal and the increase in hostilities that have affected probably much longer term now the ability to export out of the Odessa port and then also those on the Danube River. And so we're pleased that Antonina will be able to give us an update on what is going on in the Ukraine, not only from the transportation, but also from the production standpoint. And so with that, we'll turn it over to Antonina.
Thank you, Alan, for introduction. I would like to say that it is more than a year since I'm at Kansas. If somebody doesn't know, I'm Ukrainian and I came to Kansas after the war started in Ukraine. So all the situation that is going on in Ukraine and especially on a Black Sea grain market is very important to me. And this is one of my field of study, and I'm happy to share with you all the information that I have. So currently, there are a lot of concern regarding Black Sea grain market after the Russia's refusal to renew the grain deal. So today we are going to analyze current situation and perspective for future development. I will cover several questions. I will provide latest updates of damages and losses from the war to Ukrainian economy and consequences of the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant explosion. We will talk about export of agricultural commodities and grain initiative issues. And also I will provide a forecast of grain production and export from Ukraine and Russia. Unfortunately, situation in Ukraine is still very, very complicated, not only on a battlefield, but also in relatively safe region. After Russia didn't get what they expected for continuing grain deal, looks like they decided that if they cannot get over Ukraine, they're gonna destroy the most important grain infrastructure. So those photos are examples of Russian latest attack on Odessa region, where several grain farms and storage facilities were completely destroyed with hundreds of thousands tons of grain. Despite the positive results of Ukrainian counteroffensive, it goes pretty slowly because while Ukraine was waiting for military aid from Western countries, Russia built defense structures and mined the occupied territories. They also placed missiles complex in residential areas of occupied territory using Ukrainian civilians as a living shield. Unlike Russia, Ukraine cares about its people and we wish to minimize human losses. After termination of grain initiative, Russia showed one more time that they don't have any humanity. On the nights of July 18 and 11, Russia launched attacks on port infrastructure and grain terminals of Odessa and Chernomorsk ports that were involved in grain initiative. The night strike knocked out a significant port, significant part of the grain export infrastructure in the Chernomorsk port. According to experts, it will take at least a year to fully restore the object that were damaged. And besides that, in the port of Chernomorsk, 100,000 tons of grain were always also destroyed, which was supposed to be loaded on Panamax ships and sent through the grain corridor to China. The grain infrastructure of international and Ukrainian traders and carriers such as Kernel, Vitera, CMA, SGM Group suffered the most. Today, Russia hit Odessa port again, There is no updates about damage yet, but so far we know that at least one person been killed. So for shipping companies looking for a way to bring Ukrainian grain to global market, the options keep dwindling and escalating a trade crisis and adding pressure on global food prices. Of course, of the latest massive missiles and drone attacks, the value of direct and indirect damages will jump. The documented direct damages to Ukraine's infrastructure caused by Russia's full invasion as of June 1st have reached $147.7 billion at replacement cost. The latest monthly growth amounted to $200 million, a relatively low compared to previous months, reflecting the stable front line and the effective performance of the Ukrainian air defense system. The biggest share among direct damages is residential sector, which leads to a significant number of internally and externally displaced people. At least 4.7 million people are internally displaced in Ukraine, and 8.2 million people found refuge at other countries, among them 6 million in Europe. The direct damages to agriculture amounted $9 billion. Unfortunately, indirect damages exceed $40 billion. There are estimates that even the war be over this year, the southern area can reach a pre-war size not earlier than in 2030. However, production will not reach a pre-war volume due to difficulties for producers to accumulate the necessary resources to invest in increasing the yield of crops. This amount doesn't include yet the damages related to Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant dam explosion that happened in June. But as per initial calculation, the explosion of Kakhovka dam has resulted in direct damages of at least $2 billion to Ukraine. The tragedy has caused significant harm to the residential, communal, and energy sectors, as well as indirect losses to agriculture due to the loss of irrigation in affected region. It is also known at least about 31 people died on a territory controlled by Ukraine. 49 settlements of Kherson and 31 of Mykolaiv regions have suffered losses from the flood. In the Mykolaiv region, over 500 private houses in rural area have been flooded. In the Kherson region, unfortunately, it is not possible to determine the exact total number of damaged and destroyed residential buildings accurately due to the partial temporary occupation of the region by Russia. However, preliminary estimates indicate that approximately up to 30,000 houses have been affected by flooding, including at least 150 multi-story buildings in the city of Kherson. Direct damages from the flooding of private houses and related utility infrastructure are estimated at $960 million, with the majority concentrated on the left bank of Dnipro River, which is currently under occupation. Over 290 kilometers of roads, many bridges and smaller dams have been affected by flood, which may have also a long-term effect on its cost. 29 major industrial facilities located on both the right and left bank of the Dnipro River has been flooded. The destruction of crops, livestock, and fish stocks has resulted in agricultural damage of $25 million. The size of direct damages was limited due to the constant shelling of the territory since the beginning of the full-scale invasion, which had hindered the active utilization of agricultural land. So it's been damaged before the flood. Separately, the estimate amount of losses caused to environment is approximately $1.5 billion. It is said that around 150 tons of oil leaked during the dam explosion and went to the Black Sea. The salinity level of the Black Sea near Odessa is nearly 3 times lower than the norm. 4 nature reserves, including the Black Sea Biosphere Reserve, which is protected by UNESCO, are also within the affected area. So besides direct losses, there are a lot of long-term indirect losses and extra expenses. The Kakhovka Reservoir was used to supply water for irrigation system and livestock farming across a total area of 584,000 hectares. Now, Kakhovka Reservoir is almost empty. As a result, indirect losses to crop production are projected to increase by $182 million annually. And other sectors of agriculture will be losing up to $49 million per year. Due to the decrease in the water level in Kakhovka Reservoir, a significant part of Dnipropetrovsk, Zaporizhia, Mykolaiv, and Kherson region may be left without drinking water supply. The budget committee has approved the allocation of $41 million for the construction of main water pipeline. The lowering of the water level also affected the possibility of Dnipro River navigation, and there is a biggest concern about safety of the Zaporizhia nuclear station, where water from Kakhovka Reservoir was used for cooling down nuclear reactor. The energy sector accounts for over a quarter of the total damages caused by explosion of the hydroelectric power plant, amounting $624 million. So the Kakhovka hydroelectric power plant had high capacity of 335 megavolt, which is not recoverable, as well as the dam. Restoring a new hydroelectric power plant at the same capacity would require nearly $1 billion and will take at least 5 years. So this is, in general, what I would like to say about the damages. Should we take any questions, or can I go further and discuss the situation with export and grain initiative?
I think it would be good, maybe if people wanted to ask more about the infrastructure issues there at this point.
I think there is no question for now, so let's continue, and maybe we will have more on the end.
That would be good.
This is kind of a preliminary result of the Ukrainian export in the 22-23 marketing year. Despite the war and all complications with logistics, there is a positive dynamic. Ukraine exported over 49 million tons of grain, which is 1 million ton more of grain and legume compared to the previous year, and even 5 million tons more compared to 2021 marketing year. This is due to high ending stock that left after favorable season of 2021 harvest, and almost 54 million tons of grain that we had last year. At the same time, the main export in 21-22 marketing year has been done before the beginning of the war. So that is why recent June has much higher indicators than a previous year June. There is a significant increase in corn export for 6 million ton but decrease in wheat export for around 2 million ton, and barley for 3 million ton. Monthly dynamic of crop export directly reflect the performance of the Black Sea Grain Initiative, which started in August 2022 and recently ended on July 17th. Since the beginning of the war, Ukraine exported almost 33 million tons of corn and 7.5 million tons of wheat and over 6 million tons on sunflower oil. The highest export was in March, after the end of the late harvest of corn. Since export of this July is presented by half of the month, it has kind of lower indicators, but it can increase by approximately 1.5 million tons, including another million through the new ports, maybe 3,000 tons by railway, and probably 100,000 by roads. So by the end of the month, it could be around 3 million tons. So exports via Black Sea ports dominated, although we were not even close to our pre-war annual capacity. As you know, only 3 big ports around Odessa and 3 tiny ports on the new Priva work. Railway was doing by March over 1 million of grain export, but after 5 countries, European countries, Poland, Czech Republic, Romania, Hungary, and Bulgaria, introduced a ban on the import of agricultural products from Ukraine, the export by railway decreased for 30%. The same is with export by trucks, because ground shipment was governed mainly to Europe. So European Commission extended the ban on import to those countries till September 15, and we hope it will be not extended longer, especially under the blockade of the Black Sea ports. So summarizing the grain initiative execution, we can say that it was effective, but not so much as we expected and needed. Totally almost 33 million tons of grain were delivered from Ukraine, including almost 17 million tons of corn, 9 million tons of wheat, more than a million of each barley and rape seeds, and also 1.6 million tons of sunflower oil. It is important also to mention that 725,000 tons of grain were delivered within World Food Program to countries that are suffering from famine. Among them, 36% went to Ethiopia, 21% to Yemen, 18% to Afghanistan. So despite the war, Ukraine continued to take care of people around the globe and do everything possible to feed those who are starving. The geography of grain initiative is very diverse. Turkey accepted the biggest quantity of cargoes, 226, but vessels were smaller, so the total amount of grain received by Turkey is 3.2 million tons. Almost a quarter of all grain shipped via grain corridor went to China. Basically, that is corn, but it is about 2 times less than Ukraine pre-war grain export to China. So then Spain received 196 cargoes at almost 6 million tons of grain. Italy, 112 cargoes with 2 million tons. Significant part of grain that was going to Europe has been re-exported, which also makes some pressure on price increase. 1.5 million tons of grain went to Egypt via Black Sea Grain Initiative, which is actually just a half of exported grain to Egypt from Ukraine in 22-23 marketing year. So totally 46% of grain went to Asia Pacific region, 41% to Europe, and 12% to Africa. So the export dynamic by force really reflects how Russia purposely disrupted the grain agreement during the entire period. Actually, it was a plan divided into 3 periods, and summarizing final report on the work of the Russian part of the Joint Coordination Center during the implementation of the Grain Initiative was published recently. And it describes in detail the technologies that were used to hinder the implementation of the grain corridor and ultimately led to the final termination of the agreement. In this document, those disruptive technologies, they call as preventive measures of limiting uncontrolled export of grain from Ukraine. So according to this document, first, Russia temporarily suspended its participation in the agreement from October to November, from October 29 to November 3rd, allegedly due to a drone attack on the port in occupied Sevastopol. Despite this, the work of the grain corridor continued, although Russian demarche led to a drop of the volume of grain exports from 4.2 million tons to 2.6 million tons in November. Second, from November to mid-March, Russia systematically blocked the work of grain corridor. Russian inspectors slowed down the inspection of ships, stopped work for unfounded reason, demanded non-regulated documentation, etc. As of mid-February, less than half of 10 inspections were completed during the day. Third, Russia has straightened measures to curb cargo flow. In particular, at the end of March, Russian inspectors restricted the admission of vessels to the Pivdani port and stopped the registration of grain carriers. This resulted in 1.3 million tons of grain being exported in May, compared to almost 3.9 million tons in March. Later, Russia also set limits on the number of inspection teams. Russia demanded to restore the operation of the Tolyatti-Odessa ammonia pipeline in exchange for access for vessels to the largest port of Ukraine, Pivdani. But Ukraine would never agree to restore pipeline on Ukrainian territory for terrorist country. So only 3 vessels left Port Pivdani in May and no more in following months. Special attention was paid to the disruption of grain supply under the World Food Program. Vessels chartered under this humanitarian program have been stopped. Such vessels were registered only after submitting a written commitment not to participate in the program. So Russia again uses food as a weapon to block to block the grain delivery to the world and blackmail the world in order to lift sanctions, to include Rosagribank to SWIFT, that all banks of Russia were excluded, to resume the operation of Tolyatti-Odessa ammonia pipeline, to unfreeze all financial assets of Russian companies in foreign banks, to unlock transport, logistic, and the supply of spare parts. And they say that that is for agricultural machineries, but who can promise us that that's gonna be not for tanks? They look pretty similar. So This confirmed that all this list of Russian requirements just confirmed that continuation of grain initiative is even more important for Russia itself. So we'll see how long they are going to keep health. But Ukraine was ready. It was obvious that sooner or later this agreement will be broken, and we planned kind of plan B. And I think that there are some advantages for continuing Black Sea grain initiative without Russia. So without Russian inspection, Ukraine export will be not so longer sabotaged, and we will reduce shipment delay and reduce logistic cost for owners of ships and also farmers. During the period of grain initiative, some vessels waited for inspection over 3 months, and owners were losing money every day that nobody reimbursed. So customers would be sure that grain will come and be on time. Of course, there is a risk of continuing exports through Black Sea ports after Russia announced that every vessel going to Ukrainian Black Sea ports will be considered as military supplier and can be shipped. That is why the military support, Navy support to protect commercial vessels is needed. Of course, the best option is NATO or United Nations export, but at least Ukrainian Navy has to guarantee safe movement of vessels. And it would be good finally to have airplanes to protect ships from the air. So insurance premiums are likely to be prohibitively expensive for ship owners, but some of them may decide to travel to Ukrainian ports even with the elevated risk if they receive assurance from the Turkish and Ukrainian government. Actually, Ukrainian government generated $500 million fund which can be used to compensate shipment companies any losses and damages that can happen in Ukrainian ports. But as for me, it is unlikely that Russia would launch missile strikes on foreign ships. However, the aggressor can fire missiles at the terminals where ships will be parked or create more mine hazards. So all those complications with Black Sea ports, logistic forced Ukraine to continue developing alternative routes for grain export. And one of the options is the new Priva port. So Ismail, Reni, and Uzdenites were always typical ports for river navigation, while early Ukraine relied on sea and ocean shipping. However, now these ports are forced to partially reorient themselves to coastal navigation for offshore transshipment of grain in the port of Constanța. In addition, recently the Ministry of Infrastructure of Ukraine opened the passage of ships through the new Black Sea Canal through the Bystra mouth. This became possible after the liberation of Snake Island from Russian troops. So during the year, the new ports almost doubled their shipment of grain, and since May, due to constant blockade of the grain initiative by Russian side, the new ports for the first time transshipped more grain than Black Sea ports. In June, grain exports through the new port exceeded 2 million tons. However, even with the full loading and an increase on their throughput, the new ports will never be able to replace Black Sea ports. So before the war, the new port did not cover any significant share of the total Ukraine's ports cargo turnover. Share of the new ports in total Ukrainian cargo shipment in 2018-2021 was from 2.5 to 4.2%, or from 4 to 6 million tons of cargoes in general. And it was just tiny part of grain. These ports were used by rather narrow list of shippers when it was necessary to deliver goods to customers along the Danube, to Romania, to Moldova, etc. So the port of Ust-Dunajsk is actually a complete outsider due to the lack of the necessary depth and railway communication. The railway actually was built only to the port of Reni and Ismail. So at the same time, the design total throughput capacity of the new seaports is much higher than the current indicators. So Port of Ismail can do totally 8.5 million tons of all cargoes per year, Reni 8 million tons, and Ust-Dunajsk can do 4 million tons. So in 2022, the situation has changed for the new ports, and the Black Sea blockade reversed their long-term stagnation. Export imports through river ports increased almost 5 times in 2022 compared to 2021, and exceeded almost 47% of the total Ukrainian transshipment. So there is a plan to increase the new port transshipment capacity up to 25 million tons per year. At the same time, increasing the throughput capacity of the new ports requires solving a number of problems. First of all, it is hard to get there. Just several roads lead to the new ports. One is over the bridge in Zatoka, which has been constantly attacked by Russian army and closed for vehicles. And another is transit through Moldova territory, which is complicated by customs procedure and limited throughput capacity of the Palanka border crossing. Ukrainian ministry has agreed with Moldavian colleagues that the border control will be replaced by a fence along of 8-kilometer section. However, it is not known when it will happen. Another complication is that the Danube River is actually the border line in between Romania and Ukraine. And Salina mouth is located on Romania side, so the navigation needs to be coordinated with Romania. Another complication is a small depth of Ukrainian canals, which limit the size of ships. There is a project of dredging and further implementation of deep sea navigation, but again, it needs a lot of money and need to be coordinated with Romania. So the plan for development of the new ports also includes repair and modernization of the existing mechanization park, building new grain terminals and storage facilities, construction and modernization of railway tracks, assets, direct railway connection, unconstrained road traffic conditions. So, and the planned investment for the project implementation is about $200 million. So another option is to switch to 24/7 operation in the new ports, and also to use rail transshipment of grain on the territorial waters of Romania from barge to large Panamax. But this again needs to be coordinated with Romania and will involve more people who needs to be previously trained. Unfortunately, Russia goes crazy when Ukraine expands its export opportunities. And as you can see from this photo, Russia recently launched another missile strike to Reni port and partially destroyed port infrastructure. So another alternative is exports through land borders to Europe. In March, Ukrainian exports through so-called solidarity lines was over 3 million tons of grain. It decreased after ban introduction on Ukrainian grain import to 5 European countries. But even Ukrainian grain transit to European port is allowed, the throughput capacity is limited and new harvest is coming. So Europe will need to export their grain as well. And of course, it will be the priority. So, for example, maximum capacity of the Romanian port Constanța is 25 million tons of grain per year. So that is why recently Ukrainian Grain Association asked the European Commission to expand solidarity corridors for Ukrainian agricultural products to the seaports of the Baltic countries, Klaipėda and other, Germany, the Netherlands, Croatia, Italy, Slovenia, which will also include first of all, the transfer of sanitary, phytosanitary, and veterinary control from checkpoints on the border in Ukraine to the territory of the country of destination, which will ensure a significant increase in export and be faster. And second, introduction of subsidies from European Commission to compensate European carriers for additional logistics cost for Ukrainian grain transit transportation and partial compensation for European ports. So besides that, we redirect our exports through Moldova to Romanian Constanța port, and we receive 27% discount from Moldova for railway transshipment of Ukrainian grain to Constanța. So it will help increase Ukrainian export of grain in average up to 4.5 or 5 million tons per month, which could be enough due to our lower yields estimate. So a few words about how all the situation reflected on prices. Of course, Russian withdrawal from grain initiative again increased food insecurity for import-dependent countries and provoked another wave of food inflation. We already can observe that wheat prices increased from 10 to 17 dollars per ton during the last week on futures markets and up to $30 on a cash market. Ukrainian million wheat was charged was the cheapest and been traded for $203 per ton. The most expensive was France Iran for $284 per ton, and Ukrainian wheat was offered for $198 per ton and Russian for $230 per ton. Similar situation is on corn market. In average, $10 increase during last week, although American corn on cash market shows decrease in price due to higher expectation in yields and also restoration of Brazilian export of corn to China. There is also increase in price for barley in European Union markets up to $30 per ton during last week, and lately it's been sold for $166 per ton from Ukraine and $240 per ton from Australia. So our topic today is mostly related to grain market, but since Ukraine is the #1 exporter of sunflower oil in the world, I just quickly want to show how much prices for sunflower oil and soybean increased. So since the beginning of June, the prices for sunflower oil jumped almost for $200. So similar dynamic on soybean market from mid-May, average increase in prices is $60 per ton. So that is it regarding the export. Any question?
There is a question, Antonina, regarding the likelihood of Russia returning to the initiative and whether or not it would be better overall if they don't.
You know, I assume that they would, because they still want, as I say, to leave all those sanctions and resume the pipeline, ammonia pipeline to Odessa. But I think that it would be even better without Russia. And actually, Russia doesn't suffer from the situation with not like limited possibility of grain export. I have some slides on the end that show that grain exports actually goes well for Russia, and they can use other options. So we'll see. I think they will wish to return, but if it would be better for the world, I think no, because they will continue to blackmail and, you know, just try to open and close the gate when they want. So I think there is another question, right?
Yeah, the next question is, there have been reports of Russia stealing grain from Ukraine and exporting it to neighboring countries. Where does this fall in the larger picture of Ukraine's grain industry?
So yes, they continue to steal some Ukrainian grain, especially on an occupied territory, and we know that they use some navigation from Verdansk port and Mariupol. And again, on the end of my slides, I have live map of navigation, and you can see that some cargoes are coming from there. And not every country, like normal country, let's say, they wouldn't accept stolen grain, right? But some countries do, because they need some grain. They are suffering from famine. So I don't blame them, but it will not have a big influence on Ukrainian forecast, because we don't count on those occupied territory for now. Well, should I go further and discuss our forecast?
That'd be good.
So before talking about expected harvest, let's see what Ukraine has planted. The planting campaign was completed late in some region due to different reasons. First of all, that was shortage and expensiveness of fuel, seeds, limited labor. So this year, there were planted 5.5 million hectares of winter crop and over 13 million hectares with spring grain, pulses, and oilseed, as well as 213,000 hectares with sugar beets. In particular, spring grain and legumes were planted through 5.6 million hectares, which accounting 1.4% of the forecast made by Ministry of Agriculture of Ukraine, including spring wheat, 250,000 hectares, which is 46% more than usual. Corn over 4 million hectares. It's actually 12% less than in 2022. And more than 26% than in 2021, but still it's more than we expected, because as you remember, this year harvest for corn ended in March, and many farmers just decided to replace their crops with the corn with other crops such as soybean and sunflower. So as for oil seeds in 2023, sunflower seeds were planted on a territory through 5.3 million hectares. 13% more than in previous year, and soybean on the area 1.8 million hectares, which is 47% more than in previous year. In terms of regions, Dnipropetrovsk and Odessa region have the largest field with wheat, over 400,000 hectares. Kirovograd, Mykolaiv, and Vinnytsia around 3,000 hectares, 300,000 hectares. At the same time, some region has significant reduction in wheat crop in this year compared to previous, such as liberated Kharkiv region -61%, Sumy region -32%, Chernihiv region -30%. So in average in Ukraine, in regards to regions, it would be -37% of wheat sown area. Corn sown area, the largest area is in Poltava region, over 500,000 hectares, but it is 15% less than in previous year. There is a high level of decrease of corn area in Vinnytsia region, Rivne and Sumy and Dnipropetrovsk. I think that is because farmers decided to replace their crops with other crops, corn with other crops. At the same time, in Kharkiv, we have +27%. This because last year this territory been under occupation, and we didn't have almost anything from that region. So where we are now, actually the harvesting is already started, and we expect to harvest almost 10 million hectares of grain and legumes. As for now, we harvested only 15% and already have around 5.8 million metric tons of grain, including 3.4 million tons of wheat, 2.2 million tons of barley, and almost 1.4 million tons of rapeseed. The average yields are lower, and this is understandable. Ukrainian farmers were not able to apply enough fertilizer. Vegetation calendar and agri-technologies were not followed. But even under such conditions, I think that Ukrainian fertile soil shows good yields. So total grain, legumes, and oilseeds harvest in Ukraine is expected at the level of 65-67 million tons, compared to almost 74 million tons in previous year. 46 million tons of grain and legumes is expected, which is 5% less than in previous year. The focus for corn harvest is 24 million ton, which is 13 million ton less than in 2021. Wheat is around 18 million ton, almost twice less than in pre-war conditions. Sunflower seeds are expected up to 13 million tons, 4 million tons less than in 2021, but more than in previous year. So the highest expectation of wheat harvest are in Dnipropetrovsk, Kirovograd, and Khmelnytsky region, over 1.4 million tons per region. 1.3 million tons is expected from Vinnytsia and actually Odessa region. The biggest decrease is expected in Sumy region, -30%, and also in Kharkiv region that had a lot of destruction from Russia. Average by region is -14%. So it will lead to, of course, decrease in export of grain, legumes, and oilseeds from Ukraine. In 23-24 marketing year is expected around 45 million tons, compared to 58 million tons in previous year, which will worth $20 billion. Corn export can exceed 20 million tons, including ending stocks from the previous harvest. Wheat export is expected around 15 million tons. Some increase is expected on soybean export up to 5 million tons, which is 2 million tons more than in previous year. So here is our current balance of supply and demand of grain and legumes. The positive that our ending stocks by the end of 22-23 marketing year is much lower. So that is both because we were able to ship this, but also some grain was stolen and some grain was just damaged in elevators. So next year, we believe that even under limited export, we will have enough storage capacity. How sad it sounds. As you know, we lost around 13 million tons of our storage capacity, but they still around 30 million tons. So if we will harvest at least this amount, we will have almost enough to store our grain. So few words about the situation in Russia, what they expect. So this last year they announced extremely high results for grain and legumes production, almost 158 million tons, including 105 almost 105 million tons of wheat. Of course, that was included stolen grain from Ukraine, and this year they will not have this opportunity because there is nothing to steal. So they expect 123, which is pretty close to their average, and including 78 million tons of wheat, which is kind of also their average before the war. They also started harvesting already, and they already have 21 million tons of grain harvested, including 6.3 million tons of wheat. This is their expectation, according to the Ministry of Agriculture of the Russian Federation, their expectation for grain export. They expect that export would be on a level of 55 million tons, including 46.5 million tons of wheat. So this is the dynamic that I talk about at the beginning of Russian export by commodities. So if you would compare this marketing year with previous marketing year, it doesn't sound that Russia didn't export enough, or they were so limited by grain initiative to export, because they have much more opportunities to do so. And among them, the most that was wheat, of course. Russia is not a big player on a corn market as well as on a barley market. But if we would look at the destination of Russian export, we could see that there is an increase going in Americas. That is mostly Latin America's countries, and for last several months, since April, May, and June, they have big export to Brazil and Argentina. That was not usual. They also got a lot of export made to China and also to Egypt. That was actually previously Ukrainian clients, Ukrainian customers, and they kind of stole them from us. That is normal actually from them, but they have big decrease in a shipment to Africa. So we'll see what's happened after the summit that is going on now in Russia with called Russia Africa, and a lot of African leaders came there. So I heard that Russia is going to ship at least 25 million tons of grain for free for humanitarian purposes. So that is still not the same compared to 725,000 tons that Ukraine delivered under the war condition. So, and on the end, I would like to show you this real-time navigation map. And this is actually what is going on with navigation from Russia. All those green, that is cargo vessels that mostly can carry grain or other stuff, and red, that is tankers with oil. So they can go still, you see, on the bottom of the Black Sea, and have some exports. So I don't think that that is so important for them to be in a grain initiative in terms of delivering grain. They just use it as a reason to blackmail and request and demand sanctions lifting, and also including them to the SWIFT system, and resume the pipeline for ammonia fertilizers to Ukraine, etc. And you see all those vessels, they just stay on an anchor waiting for future situation. And this is the new pretty active still. So that's it, what I have for now. And if there are some questions, I would be happy to answer.
There is one question. Is there an estimate of how many hectares of cropland are not in production due to landmines?
I had this in my previous presentation, and it's actually a lot. Actually, all the territory that is on the front lines and on an occupied area will need to be demined. So if we would say that almost 20% of agricultural land is under active facilities or occupied, it means that all those hectares will need to be demined.
Well, we appreciate you being on, taking time here today. We'll have the recording of this available later this afternoon, and I'll send an email out when that's ready. Antonina, thank you much for all the stuff you presented here and all the detail. We appreciate it. And Alan, thanks for moderating it. We'll be doing this again along the way. We don't have anything scheduled for sure, but we also have our Risk and Profit Conference coming up in August, and that's kind of the next big thing for us. It's in person on August 17th and 18th in Manhattan, and we also have an online option for that the following week with 2 presentations every day at noon from Monday through Friday. So the Ag Manager website has information on that, and I'll include a link for that later when I send the link for the recording. So we did have a question, Antonina. How is your family?
Oh, I would say they're doing well as much as possible under those circumstances, unfortunately. Yeah, I hope to have all my family together one day. Yeah, my husband is still in Ukraine.
Yeah, we hope that'll happen sooner rather than later. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everyone, and we'll catch you the next time.
Yeah. Thank you. Goodbye.